I'd love to hear from all of you, and I'm sure Whitney would too. What was your biggest takeaway from her presentation? That was just beautiful. So drop that in the chat. And if you have a question, raise your hand. Evan said he appreciates your calm, soothing, slower pace of presenting. Me too. How many of you feel more relaxed after Whitney's presentation? I do. It felt really
That's
good.
like the greatest compliment I could ask for, to be honest.
It was so good. And I as a really strong Capricorn in some ways, appreciated how to the moment you finished your presentation exactly on time. And then there was a little bit more to say, but it was perfect. I have a deep appreciation for timing. Yeah. Okay. Coach Lee agrees. It was super relaxing. All right. Biggest insights and ahas, friends. So I have a question for you, Whitney. How did you get into this type of coaching, or is support your expertise, or did you just answer the question Lee asked you to tackle for this weekend?
Well, I think it was just going with what Coach Lee assigned me, really. I was actually curious about why Coach Lee asked me to do the support. I think there's part of it that's within my nature, but like I said from the beginning, the more I dig into understanding support, the more opportunities I saw to work on it, to practice it. Mm-hmm. And I get feedback from people, but I think just again, like the expertise side of things, just because you get a lot of positive feedback on something doesn't mean you can't improve it. And not from that perspective of being a perfectionist, but I feel like some people don't even really know what support looks like. And that's what was so interesting about putting this together is I realized what support looked like in some new ways just in the past few days. I got to receive it from people just after I did that friendship audit, whether that was a coincidence or not, and reevaluate. So I'm just today going through this presentation in real time. I'm excited to implement more things. So Coach Lee, why was it this assigning? Like, what is it about support? What was your thought process?
I'm so glad that I could answer that question. Well, your podcast is called It Can Get Uncomfortable. Wait, say the name of the podcast, something about uncomfortable.
This might get uncomfortable.
This might get uncomfortable. You do not invite someone to your podcast to tell them that this is going to get uncomfortable and not support them while they're there.
Fair point.
Yeah.
And you said, and their whole thing is about that. Your whole thing is about supportive and connection. And so you don't invite somebody and say, I gotcha. People do that on other shows. They don't announce that to you. But here it's a safe, supportive environment. And so that's why I thought of you. And sure enough, I was right. Because everybody here sees that, right? Everybody here sees it. So Thank you so much for coming. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, that was brilliant. I think there was so much. Your presentation is one that for me, I would watch it again and just really sit back and process. And then I'd invite my partner to watch it with me. What's come up for me a lot this weekend is the support, what I need based on how he gives. And so I'm seeing it again and again, thinking to myself, I should have had him. I should have invited him to come in and sit in here with me, and especially for you, because it's so important to evaluate. Well, what does feel like support to me? How do I feel supported? And I love these. I've talked about self-awareness a lot this weekend and how important it is in our growth, being willing to self-reflect and look at who am I? How am I showing up in the world? And when it comes to friendship to yourself and friendship to others, what do I actually need? And how is your language being interpreted by me? Am I actually understanding the language you're using in our relating, right? Because in relationships, we relate. And if I relate in French and you relate in German, then we're missing a piece here to connect.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that language analogy too, because I think, I mean, maybe that's part of the core of that concept around the 5 love languages, which, by the way, I kind of hesitated to put that resource in there because there's some problematic elements to the 5 love languages that I learned, which kind of broke my heart. I won't get into all that today, but I just want to acknowledge, like, you know, some of the sources can be problematic, and yet we can still find value in them. And in the 5 love languages, it's literally that you might have a different expression of love and a different ear for love or support. And love doesn't just need to be romantic love, kind of like you were getting at too, like the friendship side of things can be applied to romantic relationships and vice versa. And if we stay centered in that loving kindness and showing up in those ways, even if we don't know somebody's language yet, we can still pick up so much from them.
Yes.
You know,
And
like
then having that willingness to be curious and simply ask. We all think we're supposed to know, like we're supposed to know what people want and need, but we don't. We're just, you know, humans who are great at failing. And we can also be great at trying again. And putting on that curiosity hat is the best way, I feel, for someone to feel supported, not assuming we know about them, what they want us to know or what they need, but being willing to just go, yeah, what? Tell me. What do you need?
absolutely.
We had a question in, so Lee took some questions from the audience that are anonymous. So I would love to hear your answer on this, Whitney. What do you do when you have friends that don't agree with your lifestyle/relationship choices? And how do you cope with and or save that friendship?
Well, it depends if you want my personal answer or like what I would recommend for others. Because
We can,
I
well,
think,
I'm interested in both.
yeah, I'm. It's interesting because, again, as I said in the presentation, I really struggle with getting support from people. It's actually been harder in my adult life, I think, because whether it's recognizing my neurodivergence, which is new for me, I really only started down the diagnosis path of neurodivergence in the past 1.5 to 2 years, and understanding how differently my brain works and how I process things and perceive things helped me recognize, oh, maybe this is part of the puzzle piece, or the puzzle, a piece of the puzzle is what I was trying to say, to why support feels challenging, why I might not always align with people. Like, I think there can be trauma in that. Lowercase t, as they say, lowercase t trauma from people feeling misunderstood. That's a huge thing for me. And I think I started to close myself off out of fear of, like, I'm not going to be understood. These people won't agree with me, relate to me, understand me. So I'm not even going to ask for support from them. So that's something I'm figuring out now, is like, how do I move through that? How can I ask for support even if I don't want to, if I'm afraid to, if I don't feel like I'm going to get those answers? And also recognizing that they might not give me an answer that I want. And I think that comes back to that point, I think it was from Brene Brown, around we have to connect with ourselves first. And why I added in that element of when we're trying to receive for support from others, we start by gaining clarity before we even ask for it. Because through that clarity, we might find our own answers, and our friends might just be a little bit of a sounding board. And so they might say something to us that doesn't line up with us. They may say something to us that doesn't feel good. But if we've already spent some time working on ourselves, maybe it's a little bit easier to process that. And I think letting go of any definitive answers too keeps us in that place of curiosity. Like you've said, if we keep the curiosity hat on, somebody might say something to us that feels hurtful, but maybe we can be curious about the hurt. We're curious about their perspective and what can we learn from their differing perspective.
I love that.
They might not have even meant it, you know, like I think what was said earlier too about the devil's advocate. Some people they're not trying to hurt others by being the devil's advocate. They might just think that's the best approach. So it might hurt you to receive it, but perhaps we can ask them back, hey, why did you play the devil's advocate? And get curious about that response. Could help
I
us
love
grow closer.
asking more questions. And I think that's an art as well as a skill, right? So that's, again, something that we can practice is pausing for that beat and asking more questions. So for whoever asked, what do you do when you have friends that don't agree with your lifestyle or relationship choices? First, of course, as we've learned, we're going to honor you in your experience of that. And how many of you have had that experience? How many of you can have some empathy here and say, yes, me too. And I think it goes back to what you were saying, Whitney, that self-awareness and getting to know yourself and your own needs and desires. I would be asking myself the question, is that a true friend for me? Is that someone that I want in my life if they're not supporting me in my lifestyle and my relationship choices? In fact, sometimes that's family too, right? Sometimes that's family. I have a brother that I dearly love, and he surprised me by being unsupportive when my son came out as transgender. And so I've had to set really clear boundaries in that relationship. And luckily they're curious, right? So his wife reached out to me and said, I heard you don't feel like your child is safe with us. Can we talk?
Wow.
Yeah. And I said, yes, we can talk. So there's a date on the calendar. I'm not going to bring my child there that time, but we can talk because we love each other. And so we want to open up those doors of conversation and understanding. But if we were stuck in just the judgment of what we think should be or who we were 5 minutes ago or a year or 10 years ago, then we wouldn't be able to even entertain the option of moving forward in our relationships.
Yeah. Wow. And I think you're touching upon something else that I reflect a lot on is maybe people are unsupportive because they're ignorant. Like
Yes.
there's we're in a period of a lot of
Yes.
I don't know if transition's in the right word, but there's a lot of things. There's a lot more, for lack of a better term, like freedom that seems to be coming out in the self-expression. Like more people are feeling comfortable being their true, authentic selves. There's hopefully, as part of my experience, and hopefully for others, is like less suppression and more empowerment happening. But we're still also stuck in the old ways of doing things. There's a lot of people that have mentalities that they haven't learned how to get out of, or they haven't practiced it. And it takes so much practice. It takes commitment to learning about something that you don't know about, whether that's transgender, that's racism, that's all sorts of inequalities. I catch myself in this all the time. I have so much ignorance, and the ignorance can feel uncomfortable. And some people do not know they don't even realize that they're ignorant. That book, The Righteous Mind, is a phenomenal read from that perspective. That was the last on my resource list, and I would highly recommend it because it was very humbling to read, realizing like, whoa, I'm being self-righteous without realizing, like, with something like politics, where a lot of people struggle, or religion, like those are huge pain points for us in relationships.
Yes.
But just because somebody thinks and lives differently than you, does that mean that one of you is right? Like, what if we can stay in that neutral place, which I think came from Megan Devine, saying like, if the neutrality and not being like a hierarchy in our belief systems or our perspectives, it's just like that acceptance maybe can come a little bit more easily if we stay curious and neutral.
I agree. And I think that with people like you and people like everyone who's been here this weekend, there is definitely hope for that, for people to feel safe to say, I don't know about this. I am ignorant and I'm willing to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And mess up too, right?
And mess up. I think I've said that 100 times this weekend. Like, I'm willing to mess up and try again. That is my credo as a parent, as a friend, as a partner, as a daughter, as a sister. I'm willing to mess up and I will try again. I will try again every time.
And I
Yeah.
think on that side too, we can be supportive of people when they mess up on the other side. Like we can find the courage to mess up, but can we be supportive of somebody else when they mess up? If that feels good to, each situation is going to be a little bit different, but the support I've received when I've messed up, is really helpful for me to move forward, to continue learning. The stumbles I've made in all sorts of factors of people's lives. And there are times where I messed up and I didn't get to redeem myself. I've lost friendships because I said or did something that really hurt someone and they didn't give me another chance. That in itself was a learning lesson.
Right. Yes.
It happens. It depends on the other person's view of support too, just as much as your own.